So the podcast is actually supposed to be Disagreement Day, but this lady calls in and it's a face-to-face live interview, and she wants him to help her with her personal problem that has nothing to do with the theme of the podcast. And boy, does he school her. Welcome to Just a Tip Tuesday. So right out of the gate, she is on the wrong foot. Now, he's really gracious about it, but at the same time, he does call her out on calling in for selfish purposes and not the theme of the show, which is what everyone else is expecting. So he decides to use this interview as a lesson. So her question is that she's a small business owner. So she's 35, I think. And she's been in business on her own for quite a while. She's made six figures for at least the last 3 years. And she wants to know when to reveal that she's a small business owner to the guys she dates. Kevin's basically like, what does that matter? And so she's obviously thinking that she's got extra value because, she's doing well financially and she's got her own business and stuff. So she's like, she actually says these words and it was like, oh. So she says, when I date down, blah, blah, blah. And then she goes on to say something about, I want to give guys who are not on my level a chance. And Kevin's like, whoa, hold up a minute here before we go any further. Hold on here. What do you mean by not on my level? And I'm thinking, exactly, lady. Now, hey, you know me. I'm all for high self-esteem, whether you're a man or a woman. But there does feel like there's an unjustified level of arrogance or perhaps even just ignorance, which is going to be revealed a bit more as we go along here. So she reveals she wants a man who's making six figures and owns his own business. And right away, Kevin is pretty straight up about it. He's like, those men don't want you. Not exactly like that, but essentially. He says, those men aren't asking you out. Boom. And then he says, women will sometimes consider men who are below them, but then as soon as they get them, they try to fix them or change them and make them into what they want them to be. Here's the doozy. When he says, why can't you get a guy on your level? Like, bang. So then he goes back to remind her, why did she come on the show? She's selfish. She had her own agenda. She didn't care about what the viewers were there for. She wanted to get her question answered instead of hiring him for a private session. That's selfish. I agree. Now, it's one thing if it's like general Q&A, but this was a themed podcast. So this lady just wants what she wants and she doesn't really care about what others want. Now, she does apologize, so I'll give her credit for that. So then he asks her when the last relationship she had was and how long it lasted. Her last relationship lasted a year and it ended about a year ago. So then Kevin asks her why she wants a six-figure guy. And I have to say, I do respect her answer. She says she's been in business for herself for 9 years and she is into self-development and ambition and drive. And she wants the same thing from the guy she's with. Now, if you've watched some of my videos or a lot of my videos, you know that I always say you need to be with someone who's going to be in alignment with you on beliefs, values, and long-term goals. And lifestyle also plays a factor. Also, just a little side note is just because a woman wants someone with a six-figure income doesn't mean she's a gold digger. Like if she's just there to reward herself with the fruits of your labor, yeah, for sure, she's a gold digger. But this woman, I don't think she's a gold digger. She's working hard. She's, putting in the time and effort into her own business. She wants to be with someone who's not going to cost her or to make an adjustment to her lifestyle to have to carry him. So for example, she's used to going to 5-star resorts and she really likes that, but he's on a Motel 6 kind of budget. So that means if they get together, then she wants to go to 5-star. She's going to have to either compromise on other areas of her life to be able to afford that for both of them, or she's going to have to compromise her standards to meet him somewhere in the middle. Now, for you guys, you don't usually care that much about a woman's finances as long as she's not in debt and going to be a drain on yours. But for a woman, and this is often the case, even for men actually, if a woman makes a lot more than you, you often will feel like you've got to ask her. So you sort of lose some sense of masculinity when you're with a woman who's making a lot more than you. It's a different dynamic. That doesn't mean it's right, but it just is. And you might be saying, but Anna, women have been doing that to men forever. And I say, yes, I agree. I know that that's the case. Now, I'm a traditionalist, so, I have some different standards about that sort of thing. But if it bothers you, then don't be with someone who's not making as much as you, if it bothers you. Otherwise, if it doesn't bother you, just make sure that you're getting someone who makes up for not having as much money as you or making as much money as you by her having other qualities that are more important to you. So let's get back to Kevin, because he's got some brilliant points on this. So he says, how many men do you think are making six figures? And she thinks it's around 5%. Now he says maybe it's around 10%. But then he goes on to say, so all women want these 10% guys. But what do they want? Hello. Exactly. I agree. This is why I spend so much time trying to help you develop yourself to be the kind of guy that the most amount of women would want while not compromising yourself. And if you've watched my channel for a while, or you've taken my Wake Up to Love program, you know that financial net worth is only one metric. In fact, it's not even the most important financial metric. So if you haven't done my program, that might be something you want to consider. Okay, so let's get back to their conversation. So he asked her, what do these kind of guys want? And she's like, well, brains, arm candy. She actually said arm candy. Arm candy, but then brains and maybe some depth. So then he asks her if she wants to be married and have kids. And she reveals she's got a 13-year-old son. Oh, there's another factor that weighs in. Sorry, ladies, but it's absolutely true. And she didn't reveal too much about the dad, but she definitely gave the impression that it wasn't a great relationship. So Kevin points out to her that the kind of men that she wants, those 10% earners, don't generally want a woman with a kid and some baby daddy that maybe you don't have a great relationship with. I agree, right? Like, think about it. If you're in the 10%, do you have on your list single mom? Probably not, right? Like, you have options. But she's all like still stuck on the fact that she's, a high value woman and she wants to develop herself and improve herself. But she's just really not getting the point. Like, she's having a hard time realizing that she's a woman in her mid-30s heading toward the wall. Hey, there's a wall. With a kid, and his dad is not a great influence in the picture. She's not getting that her being a business owner isn't as valuable to men as it is to her. At least not to the men in the top 10%. So Kevin says, I cannot change men. I'm not a miracle worker. It's true. You want them, they don't want you. Hashtag harsh truth, tough love, reality land. So she keeps going back, talking about how she's working on herself and improving herself. And essentially, she's just really not getting. She's not wanting to admit to herself that her value is not as high as she'd like it to be for those 10% men. And Kevin asks her again, why would a man who's in that 10% want a woman with a kid and a sketchy father in the picture? And because she's not getting it, he tries to say in a different way. So let's say your son is a man and he's in that top 10%. Do you want him coming home with a woman with a 13-year-old kid and a sketchy dad? Or do you want him to be with someone who's younger and doesn't have kids? She had to pause there because, yeah, right. What would I really want? Trying to be objective about it. Now, I will say, I do know a single mom who is pretty amazing, as high value a woman as you can get with a kid. And she met a six-figure guy, and her son at the time was, I think, around 15 or 16. So kind of the home stretch. And they're still together. It's been 3 or 4 years. But she treated him like a king. She knew what to do to make up for the things that were probably not on his must-have list. So it is possible, but it's still rare. So of course this lady thinks she's the exception to the rule. And Kevin says, All women think they're the exception to the rule. I'm like, yeah, I get that. I agree. I gotta say, he's very direct, but I will also give her credit. Even though he's been really direct and given her some pretty intense feedback here, she hasn't gotten triggered. She hasn't gotten emotional. She's actually looks like she's taking or trying to take it in, even though it's having a hard time catching up with her cognitive dissonance. But then she says, 20-something-year-olds aren't attracted to 45-year-olds. And he's like, whoa, 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 I'm 51 and I got to beat him off with a stick. And yeah, I totally agree. When you're in that top 10%, you get anybody you want, basically. Well, maybe not anybody, but you have a lot of options. 20-something-year-olds, you can get them. In fact, you can get 30-something-year-olds and 40-something-year-olds without kids. So, you know, this is just a harsh reality that women have to face. The sooner you get over it, the better you'll feel. So then he asks her to rate herself without using 7, which is kind of brilliant. It really brings out the truth. So she gives herself a rating of like a 5 or 6, depending on if she's done up or not so done up, which I give her credit for being honest. And so then he goes back and he's leading her down the path from entitlement to enlightenment by saying, so a self-proclaimed 5 or 6, average at best, is looking for the top 10%. How realistic is that? I say, I agree. So he tries to drive the point home by saying, women like you die alone. You think you're better than the men you qualify for. Gentlemen, the good news is your options expand as you improve yourself, and age doesn't matter. If you want to know where to improve yourself without compromising yourself, then you really should get my Wake Up to Love program. So then at this point in the video, she starts getting distracted by her phone for more than a cursive look. Cursive, is that the right word? Anyway, she's starting to spend a little bit too much time on the phone, which is really super rude. He actually ignores it, but it keeps going for a while. And then finally she asks him, basically, well, what do those men want? And again, he asks her, you know, what she thinks she has to offer. And she's like, well, I got this business and I can help him with his business. And I'm into self-development. She's into gardening. And Kevin and me, we both like, okay, that's nice, but that's not on the must-have list of these 10% guys. That's not even on the must-have list of most not 10% guys. And then finally she asks him, well, what do men want? And at this point, he's pretty frustrated because she's still been on her phone in these last few minutes here. Like, she's probably having a hard time. Like, all of a sudden, her sake, he's going like, don't like this information. Don't like this like, let's distract ourselves because I don't want to deal with that information. But hopefully, she'll have maybe taken some of it to heart and start looking at what she can do in the areas where men actually value, so that she can get a guy that she'll be happy with. Because if she doesn't adjust her standards and or develop traits that men really do want, then she is going to die alone. Sorry, ladies, don't shoot the messenger. And gentlemen, again, if you want to become the kind of guy who has the most options possible, then you want to get my Wake Up to Love program. But I got to warn you, there is a lot of homework, and some of it is going to be definitely out of your comfort zone. You're going to have homework at home and out in the real world. But it provides a step-by-step process so you know where to focus on and which step to take next. So it's not jumping in the deep end of the pool, which is super scary. It's like, okay, I put my toe in here, and that's helping, and then you move along at the pace that works for you, but you do move along doing specific things that are going to help you get the girl you want and deserve. Because if you don't want your relationship status to be the same as it is now, in 6 months, a year, 5 years, nothing changes. If nothing changes, nothing changes if you don't take different action. You can watch all my videos and they will help you, but it'll take a lot longer than doing a course that's 5 or 6 weeks long. So check it out. God bless. Thanks for being here.